Maybe
Okay,
you can
wonderful.
edit the imperfections out when you're done.
Wonderful. It's going well. Okay. Ken, take me back to April 1975. You encounter Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. What did you think?
I heard about Dungeons and Dragons for the first time in December of 1974.
Oh,
It was mentioned in a Spanish publication that I occasionally read. When I read that, I said, this is a game for me. But it did not exist in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, at least not in any of my Spanish circles. Months went by. The game grew in popularity around the country. And one night, a Friday night, when I went over to the Friday night games club meeting, one of the people had brought his newly purchased white box edition of Dungeons and Dragons. But I got there a little late. He didn't know how to play it either. He just had the box. Everyone else was already playing Risk. But I asked permission and got permission to look at the Dungeons and Dragons box. So while all the other gamers played Risk, I speed read the 2 volumes inside the box, printed in small print with no pictures, how to play Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of it didn't make any sense to me. I quickly realized that what I was reading was rules for a miniature game, as it seemed to be much more important to track movement in inches than any particular place in the adventure. Finally, I got to the part that described how to create a character, and I went through it very cautiously and attentively. So there were these attributes that would describe your character with numbers. That's easy enough to understand. I looked at them. Did they make sense? Strength. Yes. Constitution. Yes, that made sense. Intelligence. Yes, that made sense. Charisma. Yes, that made sense. Wisdom. Wait a minute. Wisdom? We already have intelligence. And this is about characters who go down into the holes in the ground to fight monsters and take their stuff. It does not imply any wisdom to me. That's pure blockheaded stupidity. So I threw wisdom out. What could I replace it with? Luck. Yes, luck will save you when wisdom won't.
Correct.
And the last one, I think, was dexterity. That made sense. So there were 6 attributes, only one of which didn't make any sense. I changed that to luck. As I was reading this, I got to thinking, you know what? This is a wonderful idea. What a wonderful idea. What a terrible way to do it. Making you keep track of your little miniature and how it's moving, and making you keep track of every ounce of encumbrance you were carrying, and all the other fine details that just slowed the story down. I couldn't read the whole thing in 2 hours. Parts of it didn't make any sense at all. I just skipped all of that. But I got the idea. You had an adventure going on with a group of people who were exploring and hoping to gain treasure. And they were likely to meet monsters, and they were armed in a medieval or pre-medieval style. So no guns. At the end of the 2 hours, I said, I can't play this game, but I could make a game that I could play, and that's what I'll do.
So you make your own game. The name you named Tunnels and Trolls. Was that always the name that you want to give to that game?
Tunnels and Trolls came out as a joke. When I started showing this game to my friends, and it became very popular very quickly, one night on a Friday night club meeting, after we had basic rules that people could pass from hand to hand but did not have a printed book yet, everybody asked me if we were playing Dungeons and Dragons now. I said, well, no, we can't play Dungeons and Dragons. That name is already taken. At the time, there was a rock and roll song that was very funny about cave dwellers called troglodytes. So I said, let's call the game Tunnels and Troglodytes. The whole room burst into laughter. And my friend Rob Carver said, no, that will never work. It's got to be called Tunnels and Trolls. That motion passed by acclamation, and before the book was ever finalized, the name of the game became Tunnels and Trolls.
But the
So
first
from the very
edition,
beginning, it was not all me. I was accepting suggestions from my friends and other
okay,
gamers,
and they did it
but I was
well.
the one who made things happen.
But you printed the first 100 copies yourself, no? Isn't true?
Yes, in order to have enough copies for my friends, I decided to print 100 copies. I made the original manuscript. I got my friend Mark Anthony, who is a famous chiropractor in the United States now, to help me with the layout. We went over to Rob Carver's room near Arizona State University and showed up one afternoon when he was there with the original rules booklet in hand and blank spaces where we hoped to put illustrations. We put that down in front of him and said, Rob, you're the only artist I know, so we're not leaving until you fill this book with empty spots with illustrations. And Mark and I sat there all afternoon, egging him on, cheering the funny ones and telling him, well, that's not going to work, if he did something wrong, until he filled up the entire book, front and book, and all the empty spots inside with the original Rob Carver illustrations that can still be seen in the reprint of the first edition of Tunnels and Trolls. When that was done, I took it to the print shop at Arizona State University, told them to make 100 copies for me. They told me how much it would cost, which was $65. I paid them on the spot. I deputized my friend Steve McAllister, pick it up, and I went on a vacation with my wife to Nevada and California for 2 weeks. The point of going to California was that would coincide with a science fiction convention in Berkeley there that I was planning to attend, and so were my friends. So at that science fiction convention, Steve McAllister showed up and gave me my 100 copies of Tunnels and Trolls, which I immediately began selling to everybody who would take one for $1 a piece. At that point, Dungeons and Dragons cost $10. At that point, $1 would buy a lot more than it does now.
I imagine.
Is that enough of an origin story?
Yes, yes. Let's switch to the invention of solo adventures. In, correct me if I'm wrong, 1976, Flying Buffalo published Buffalo Castle, the first solo adventure ever created for a role-playing game. How did that idea come about?
That idea came about because of something that my friend Steve McAllister told me. We were at a science fiction convention in Phoenix later that year. Guest of honor was Roger Zelazny, a famous science fiction writer and a friend of mine. Steve got together in a group where I was there, Liz Danforth was there, Rick Loomis was there, Roger was there, and Steve was there. And probably my friend Bear Peters was there in that group at this science fiction convention. And Steve told us about his great idea. He said, Ken, there's something called programmed instruction. He was working as a mechanic for Boeing at the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport at the time. And whenever he had to fix something, they would hand him a book. He would find the problem in the book, and then he'd go through picture by picture, page by page, that told him how to fix it. He described this process so well to both Rick and I that we understood it. The difference was Rick went home after the science fiction convention and wrote an adventure to go with it. He based it around his business, which was called Flying Buffalo, and he called it Buffalo Castle. And he had the printed first edition of Tunnels and Trolls to work from for rules. So he used the TNT rules with the programmed adventure thing that sent you from paragraph to paragraph and created the first solo adventure.
Buffalo Castle. Buffalo Castle was a gentle work, a teaching tool, but your Death Trap Equalizer Dungeon and your Naked Doom, those had a very different reputation.
Yes. I was a little bit of a troublemaker. I decided I would create the second one. And the second one, I decided that it would be fun if we started off the adventurer with absolutely nothing. Naked Doom. We would throw him into a dungeon with monsters and everything inside it and see if the player was smart enough and tough enough to survive and come out and become an adventurer. Now, my friend Rob Carver was also an unconventional kind of guy. And when I asked him for a cover for Naked Doom, that's exactly what he gave me. A front cover with a naked man, completely naked, full frontal nudity, charging into a dungeon with guards behind him shooting arrows at him. Rick, who was a good Baptist, laughed at the idea, but he said, "You can't use that cover." So Rob drew a loincloth over the top of the dangling penis,
Mm.
and it got printed in that form. As you can see, it was all about shaking up the establishment in those days.
Yes, yes. And the format that it was created, um, that is numbered paragraphs, branching choices, dice rolls,
The Death
integrated.
Trap Equalizer Dungeon was another one where I decided to break the rules.
Uh-huh.
Instead of having you walk through all these tunnels, spending a lot of time just walking around doing nothing, which is much like real life, uh, I said, let's just teleport them from situation to situation so that it's nonstop action. And that was the first teleport dungeon.
No. But those rules became the model for game books worldwide. 6 years later, Fighting Fantasy launched using that same structure, that same rules, and sold millions. How did you feel watching that happen?
Uh, Nothing I could do about it.
Okay.
I made a quiet note to myself that we did it first, and I would tell the world that whenever I got a chance. But really, I don't fight with things that I can't change.
Okay. It's a wise choice. It's a wise way of living. In Italy, we call these books libro game. There's a very passionate community here that grew up on them. Millions of readers. What does it mean to you knowing that something you helped create touched so many lives?
It's nice to know that I changed the world in some way. There was an Italian edition of Tunnels and Trolls
Yes.
in the late 70s or early 80s. It came from the Tor publication of the Tunnels and Trolls series that we licensed in England. And they then licensed it to Italy, Spain, and Japan.
Um, in 1976, the same year as the first solos, you published Monsters, a game where players are the monsters raiding human villages. That was a radical concept for the time, no? Isn't it?
Yes. A man named Howard Thompson, who had a company called Metagaming, got in touch with me and asked if I could create a role-playing game for him. I had an idea. I said, sure, I have an idea. How about we take the standard setup of humans versus monsters and turn it on its head and let the players be the monsters. And then your object would be to go and be as monstrous and terrible and horrible as you can and have a lot of fun doing that. Howard liked the idea. I wrote it, and I got my new artist friend, Elizabeth Danforth, to illustrate the whole thing. And we did that in 1976. That was the first time a role playing game used monsters as the protagonists. It was long before White Wolf came out with Vampire the Masquerade. That
Now
was
let's.
Monsters, and in between was Starfaring.
Okay. Let's go beyond Tunnels and Trolls now and Monsters. In 1981, that was a big year. Chaosium asked you to design the beloved, at least in Italy, Stormbringer, based on Michael Moorcock's Eric novels. What was it like for the first time designing for someone else's world?
You know, I was a big science fiction and fantasy fan from earliest childhood, and I had already read Michael Moorcock's books. I still have those two first editions here in my library. I was friends with Greg Stafford of the Chaosium. A fellow gamer named Rudy Kraft told me that Chaosium was going to do a licensed version of Michael Moorcock's Elric series, which they had obtained because Gary Gygax and TSR had messed up and used those copyrighted, owned characters without permission from Michael Moorcock. Moorcock sued TSR and he got his characters back. Then Chaosium contacted Moorcock and asked him if they could do a game based on his characters in his world. I heard about it from Rudy. I saw Rudy's rough draft. I wrote to I wrote to Greg Stafford and said, Greg, let me propose a different way of doing it that is not an imitation of Dungeons and Dragons that Rudy gave you. So I gave him an alternate proposal for Stormbringer, as the game was going to be called. My proposal used a D100 for skills for the first time instead of using a D20. I said, as long as we're using a 100% scale, why do it in increments of 20, you know? Yeah. Let's have your skill level could be 37%, and you roll against a 37 instead of against a 40 or less. So Greg liked my idea and hired me to do the adaptation of Michael Moorcock's game world into rules for Stormbringer. The other thing I did was we'll create an original magic system that nobody has used before that's entirely based on summoning demons and elementals and supernatural creatures of all types. There's no fireball that you can throw at your enemies. If you want to use magic against them, you have to enchant a weapon in some fashion, or you have to call a demon or some other supernatural creature to attack them. This was original back in 1981.
Absolutely.
And became a very popular game and a success for the Chaosium.
It's very loved here in Italy, Stormbringer. Then came Wasteland in 1988. Well, this is one of the most influential computers RPGs ever made. And it's the direct ancestor of Fallout, the video game. How did you end up on that project?
This is another example of the rule I live by, that the Beatles said best in their song, I get by with a little help from my friends.
Wonderful.
There was a gamer named Bob Liddell who wanted to become a computer game designer. He left his home in Illinois and traveled to California to speak with Brian Fargo and apply for a job with Brian's company, which was called Interplay. On his way to California, he came through Phoenix and asked if he could talk to me for a while. I didn't know him before then, but I said, sure. Always happy to talk to another gamer. So we spent an evening discussing his plans to become a computer gamer in California and how Tunnels and Trolls worked. Well, Bob screwed up when he got to California. During his interview with Brian Fargo, he told Brian all about Tunnels and Trolls and me in Phoenix. Brian decided that I sounded like a much better game designer than Bob and contacted me and asked if he could come over and talk to me about a post-nuclear role-playing game based on the movie Red Dawn, and asked me if I would like to write it. Well, I wouldn't pass up a chance to get into computer gaming this way. So I started working on a game design using the embattled American farmers of Iowa against communist uh, occupation troops, much like the movie. I created that scenario, examined it, and said, "This is boring. We need something more exciting. What if it was uh, the remnants of the United States being attacked by killer robots after World War III?" So when I showed Brian the two things, I said, "Here's the Red Dawn scenario, which is American farmers versus Russian troops, and is nothing but people shooting each other back and forth, and it's pretty dull. And here's one where we have killer robots of all different types roaming around the American Southwest, trying to exterminate all life, or at least all major life, so that they could rebuild the world from scratch from samples that they had stored from before World War. And it's all being run by giant computers in a underground U.S. Air Force base that has decided there's no place for mutants in the new world, so they have to destroy them all. And this sends out these killer robots in wave after wave to attack everything in a growing circle around that original base, which was, of course, hidden in Death Valley. We have these great names for places here in the USA. I pitched that idea to Brian, and Brian loved it. He said, my elevator pitch was Arizona Rangers meet the Terminator. Now, in Arizona history, there was a time when the only law enforcement group in the state was called the Arizona Rangers, an organization modeled after the Texas Rangers. These were not local enforcers, they were statewide enforcers. So a ranger could go anywhere to take in any outlaw. We made the heroes of Wasteland a new form of Arizona Rangers. They were ex-military because the military had been destroyed in the World War. But this group had lived through, this company had lived through by barricading themselves in a remote prison in Arizona, a place unlikely to be bombed and unlikely to be swarmed by hordes of refugees because it was so far away from every place else. That would be the city of Ajo on the Arizona-Mexico border. As you can see, I was using what I knew to create a post-war scenario that would make sense if you granted the premise that an insane computer was sending out killer robots to exterminate all the people. The people, of course, did not want to be exterminated and applied for help to the Arizona Rangers.
Yeah,
and from that rose the whole
sense.
game of Wasteland.
It makes perfectly sense. Ken, for 35 years, you worked as a public librarian while designing games. How did you balance those two lives?
Did you use the word balance?
Sorry?
Did you use the word balance?
Yes.
There's no balance in St. Andre games.
Oh, okay.
There are good guys and bad guys, and people in the middle. And the smart survive, the lucky survive. The stupid and unlucky die, which pretty much represents the real world as I know it. There is no balance. Even things like organized sports are not balanced. The best teams in the NFL won 13 out of 16 games this year. The worst team in the NFL won 2 games. Theoretically, they should all be balanced. But, I mean, you know, they use the draft system to give the worst teams a chance to get the best players and so on. But it's really the teams with the most money and the smartest managers who win year after year. So there is no balance in St. Andre games. The concept is anathema. We're not creating chess here. We're creating a game where there's a chance to be heroes and villains, not a chance where you can play checkers and only the smartest player wins.
Okay. Ken, in 2015, after a successful Kickstarter, now let's talk legacy and present. In 2015, after a successful Kickstarter, you released Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, the definitive edition, 40 years after the original. How do you feel about how it turned out?
That's a tough question.
Mm.
Uh, the truth is, I did a rough draft for Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, and the chosen editor, Elizabeth Danforth, changed almost everything to her version of what the game should be. She left my name on it, and included her own in the credits in there. But that is the most heavily edited of all the Tunnels and Trolls games. It's big, it's pretty, it's well illustrated. You can still play the
386
game with it,
pages.
but it's not my favorite edition. My favorite edition was the uh, Tunnels and Trolls edition 7.5, which was printed by, God, I forget their name now. It was a Canadian company, you know. So in 2005, this company decided to offer Brick Loomis a chance to do a 30-year memorial edition, which they would design and publish. And they designed a miniatures game using cardboard stand-ups and some miniatures rules that barely held up. But they had a really pretty tin box to put it in. When I saw their version, I contacted the president of the company and said, no, that's not Tunnels and Trolls. You can't sell that as Tunnels and Trolls. I will never support it. They said, well, in that case, we'll give you 30 days to produce a working copy of the rules that you would support. So I rewrote Tunnels and Trolls as the 7th edition. There was no 6th edition because the 6th edition was pirated by people in both England and the United States and published completely without my agreement.
Was it Fiery Dragon, the
Fiery
publisher?
Dragon, that's the company, yes.
Okay. I found it on Drive-Through RPG.
I don't know what inspired them to offer to do the 30th year edition, but it worked out well for Rick and me because I got that 7th edition written in less than a month. And I incorporated some important changes that I thought improved the game of Tunnels and Trolls. For one thing, I did away with the logarithmically expanding number of experience points you had to gain to increase your attributes, and came up with a whole new system of attribute increase. Instead of getting 2 points to add to your attributes when you hit 2nd level, you could increase any attribute when you had 10 times its value in experience points to spend. So thus, you wound up buying your attribute points more directly instead of being granted them just because you had so many experience points of adventuring. That was another breakaway from the Dungeons and Dragons style of doing things. So, and then in 7.5, I modified it and made it a little bit better again for the reprint of the 7th edition. So 7.5 is my favorite Tunnels and Trolls edition.
Anyway, you're still publishing through Trollhalla Press and Troll Godfather Press. What drives you to keep creating, if I can
What drives
ask?
me to keep creating?
Yeah, what drives you?
People who create do it because they have to, and they love it. It doesn't matter what they're creating. They could be making statues, they could be painting pictures, they could be knitting, they could be just making bad jokes and spreading them around the internet, you know, in the form of memes. But people who love to create don't stop until they can't do it anymore. In 2011, Tunnels and Trolls was sort of sinking into a low spot. I wasn't getting much income from playing Buffalo from it. It was losing popularity everywhere. And I decided if nobody else would do it, I would create new adventures and publish them myself by mimeograph or whatever. And I started to doing that. I produced them. I produced original manuscripts. I found artists to illustrate them. And I took them to a photocopy shop and had them photocopied in usually 100 copies of it so that I could send to all the people who wanted them. I figured in 2011 I had maybe 100 fans left in the world. But if I could get more adventures out there, new stuff, I could gain more. And this would give me a good excuse to keep writing Tunnels and Trolls adventure. A
What's
few
the
years
most?
later,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
learned about an organization called Drive Through RPG.
yes.
And this really opened up personal publishing for the world. All you had to do was give them a printable manuscript in the format of their choice, which was PDFs, which newly invented at the time. Give them that PDF, and they would publish it and make it available to everyone in the world who could find it on the internet, and would give the creator 70% of the royalties. That's a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, very pretty.
Um, I jumped on that because I know a good idea when I see it most of the time. I jumped on that, started doing it. I found artists and other people who would like to do it, and they have some submitted manuscripts, some submitted art. I paid them rock bottom wages, which is what I could afford. Uh, an artist, who worked a long time on a picture might expect anywhere from $100 to $1,000 for it from big business. I told them flat out, if you work for me, you get $10 per illustration. If you do a great cover, I can give you 50. There were plenty of artists who would work for that. And some of them are still my friends. And we made it work. I created, what did I call it? Trollhalla Press. Trollhalla was an organization I started in 2002 for Tunnels and Trolls fans on the internet. It was modeled on the idea of the Norse Valhalla. Uh, Valhalla was where Norse heroes went after their death.
Sort of
A
paradise.
Trollhalla was a organization where any hero of Tunnels and Trolls, that is, anybody who played and promoted the game, in my viewpoint, was a hero, could gather and have an organization where they could converse with each other and have a good time. And Trollhalla still exists in a kind of shadowy Netherland. Trollhalla stopped existing on the computers when GeoCities turned into Yahoo. But Trollhalla Press continued as my publishing agency to do the new solos I started in 2011, and all of the stuff I started putting on Drive Through RPG because a publisher needs a press.
Yeah, of course.
And Trollhalla is a much cooler name than St. Andre.
Drive-through RPG has been a really breakthrough for auto publishing. I myself imagine that I have published a couple of modules for D&D. Not D&D, but D&D like. So if I have published, everyone could publish on Drive-through RPG. It's really good. It's really a fantastic way of how to publish.
Congratulations. Don't you feel better for having done that?
Yes, yes, but it's very time consuming, and I don't know if I can keep on creating really. It's not a mm, it's not a deep as yours, as deep as yours.
Now that you are a media star, you have other demands upon your time.
Yes, yes, of course. Ken, sorry, I have a final question for you. If a young designer asked you, what's the most important thing in game design, what would you say?
Uh, Most important thing for a young designer, be original if you can. Share with your friends. Be open to new ideas that come from outside your own brain. Get lots of pretty pictures to go along with it, because much of Tunnels and Trolls' success owes to the art of Liz Danforth and other talented artists who illustrated books through the years. And never give up. If you can't find an outside publisher to do it yourself. I did it myself. Edgar Rice Burroughs self-published his first few stories, created a whole publishing company to publish his books when ordinary publishers didn't offer him good enough deals. There is no substitute for standing on your own feet, fighting for your own causes, and believing in yourself and your products. Don't expect a lot of help from the established people because you're the competition. And honestly, if we're already established, we don't want any more competition. We just want to stamp you little guys out. Trump, 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 Trump. Right now, I've been trumped on plenty, but I never gave up. I'm still doing it. When I lost the rights to Tunnels and Trolls in 2019 to keep Rick's sisters from losing their home to debt, I kept the rights to Monsters, and we're still doing lots of original, beautiful, clever Monsters things today. Wish the Zoom was working so I could show you the books that I have produced for Monsters. But if you look on the internet, under Monsters, you'll see pictures of them. Or if you go to my site, monsters.org,
okay, I will.
You will see
take a look.
Pictures of all the nice things I am doing with what is basically the Tunnels and Trolls game system, good on its head so that you play the monsters instead of the humans most of the time.
I will surely take a
I
look.
redefined humans as a class of monsters so that they could be in this game. And we are monsters, you know.
Well, at least most of us. Okay, Ken, I can't thank you enough for being here with me in this podcast. Before we go, I want to ask you a question. The question of the questions, the mother of all questions. Is there anything you wish people would ask you about, but they never do?
Ricardo, there were too many echoes in that for me to understand your question.
Oh, okay. Is there anything you wish people would ask you about, but they never do?
Anything I wish that people would
ask you?
Would ask me, but they never do?
Exactly. Is there anything?
Well, sure. I wish they would ask me about all my famous and beautiful girlfriends. But they never do.
No, eh?
And it's probably a good thing because, you know, neither one of my wives would have appreciated it.
I think so. Okay, Ken, thank you for your time, your work, and your legacy. And I hope you will be again with us in the future to talk more about Tunnels and Trolls, Monsters and Monsters, and all the work you're doing right now.
I'm always happy to promote my work with good interviewers like yourself.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so bye, Ken.
Arrivederci.
Ken.
Arrivederci.
Ciao.
Amigo.
Ciao, Ken.